speed hump part of the day. My name's Sarah Gray. I'm the kinship manager based at Herefordshire Council. We are based within the fostering service. I have a background within private fostering. In my last local authority, I was a private fostering social worker alongside my other roles and also managing private fostering in that local authority. So it's nice to be able to come back into this now because I haven't done this for a while. So it's nice to be able to talk about private fostering and get some of the awareness out there. Kirsty's very kindly going to move between slides for me, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat for any questions that come up. So please do feel free to ask any questions. Nothing is silly. Nothing is going to be, a topic that I haven't heard before. So please do that. Thank you very much, Kirsty. So everyone's heard of Victoria. I often start with Victoria when I talk about private fostering because I think it just helps to highlight the importance of private fostering being a major safeguarding role within every local authority. Victoria was living with her great aunt, and because of that, she was a privately fostered child. And unfortunately, the monitoring and assessment of that situation didn't happen as it should. And because of what happened to Victoria, it's meant that the Laming inquiry and legislation has now been bolstered, and it's been bolstered since about 2005. And it's very much something that we should be looking at and considering within any of our practice, whether that's social work, health, education, wherever it is that we come from. Thank you, Kirsty. So what is it? This is often the question that's asked because many people haven't heard of private fostering, and that includes social workers who have studied the Children Act. And to be clear, it is a private arrangement between a parent and a carer, and the child must be under the age of 16 or 18 if they are disabled. The prime thing that people often get a little bit confused about is whether the child is staying at home or staying away from home. The key part of the legislation is that the child must be living away from home with that private foster carer, and that private foster carer cannot be a close relative. So when we say close relative, it is defined here, and it's very clear in legislation if anyone wants to look it up. But if you're a mum, a dad, a sister, a brother, aunt, uncle, those are all close relations. When we get to great aunts and second cousins and parents of friends, that's not considered a close relationship. Thanks again, Kirsty. So private foster carers are those people who are caring for a child day to day. It is up to them to ensure that a child is being cared for well and that they are promoting their welfare and keeping them safe. However, that carer doesn't hold any parental responsibility for the child in their care. That always stays with the personal persons who already hold that parental responsibility. And ultimately, it's up to that person with the PR to ensure that a child is safe. Some parents may not agree with where a child is staying. Some parents may wish to make certain decisions about the child and how they are cared for, and that is up to them. One of the main things that agencies do get confused about is private fostering is nothing to do with what we call independent fostering agencies or private fostering agencies. So within the fostering service, we often use independent fostering agencies to provide placements for children who are in the care system. That is very different to private fostering, but I do understand where some of that confusion comes from because the title would indicate that perhaps we are dealing with an agency and we're not. So it's just to remember that if a child is privately fostered, that child is not a child in care. Thanks, Kirsty. So why do children come into arrangements? And there's a whole range of reasons, and this is a short list as you can read for yourself. But the ones I've generally come up with in the past, it's a lot of family breakdown, parents who have been poorly, so they haven't been able to look after a child and therefore just need some help for a short amount of time. In my last authority, we had a lot of Chinese students who would come over for exchange with a local school. Therefore, we would have perhaps an influx of, say, 30 Chinese children into our area for approximately 8 to 12 weeks, and they would fall under the private fostering legislation. So we would assess and monitor them. So there are all sorts of different reasons, but generally, those are the ones that I've come across the most. And I would guess that within Herefordshire, when we identify children, that probably sits somewhere around there as well, around family breakdown, children coming for education, or perhaps the illness of parents. Thanks, Kirsty. So, as much as I've already said, children are not children in care. They are not placed. Private foster carers are not approved legally. We do need to recognise that children who are privately fostered are vulnerable. Now, some of that is due to by dint of the fact that they're not at home. So, for example, the Chinese students that I used to work with, very competent students, very academic, there didn't seem to be many issues, but they were still living away from home. And because they were living with people that they didn't know, in a country they didn't know, they automatically become vulnerable children. And then we can move through to those that are at risk of sexual and criminal exploitation, those that could be used within a forced labour market, children who are just trying to deal with the family breakdown crisis, whatever it is that's going on at home for them. And some of those children will be children in need or in need of protection. And that's another layer that then exists within the private fostering work. It's not just about looking at a private foster carer caring for a child. It's about social workers undertaking what's necessary to help that child, whether that's under children in need or if they're subject to CP planning. Thanks, Kirsty. So I don't know if anyone's ever heard of any of the research or has taken note of anything that's been said nationally about private fostering, but there has been for a very long time a real issue around private fostering arrangements being identified within local authorities. If people don't know about private fostering, they don't know how to identify it. And if they do identify, if they don't notify the local authority, then as an authority, we don't know about the child and we can't do what we need to do. So when children are hidden as well, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally, we need to be really clear that we have a duty to do what we need to do. And if we can't do that, then we could have children who are at risk. And this is where agencies come into play, particularly education and health, and that professionals who have that contact with children and families, with education on a near enough day-to-day basis, have a key role to play in identifying arrangements. And that means that these sorts of awareness raising sessions or any kind of consultation that goes on is really important. I was saying to Kirsty earlier that if nothing else comes of this awareness raising, if people can come to me and ask questions, if they're unsure about, is this a private fostering arrangement? Is it not? What do I do? Who do I speak to? That's great. I really would love to have that consultation in place and to be able to have those chats and to build the relationships and get to know as many people as possible. I haven't been in Herefordshire that long. I live a long way from Herefordshire. So the fact that we can build some working relationships and start that conversation to me is really, really important. Thanks, Kirsty. So roles and responsibilities, the person with PR or the private foster carer does have the responsibility to notify the local authority. Otherwise, we're down to a child mentioning it. Sometimes they do. Sometimes teenagers, the younger teenagers do come to the local authority and go, by the way, this is where I'm living. And that's still okay. It's still a way of us being notified, but that's not how it should be. It should be parents or private foster carers, really, that those people with parental responsibility, ideally. There are responsibilities on the person with parental responsibility to ensure that they are helping the private foster carer financially. So, for example, the private foster carer being able to claim child benefit, or the parent or person with PR saying, here's some money to help you care for my child during the month, and trying to make sure that there is that two-way relationship. So we haven't got a private foster carer who's just feeling that they've been landed with looking after a child without any of that support. Thank you, Kirsty. So ideally, we should be notified at least 6 weeks before any arrangement is due to start. In my experience, which goes back over 16 years, I think I've only known that happen on about 2 occasions. Generally, children are already within a private fostering arrangement when it's identified. So in those circumstances, the arrangement needs to be notified to the local authority as soon as it's known, basically. So we will get on to doing what we need to do as soon as we can. You'll often find that private foster carers don't know that they've got a child coming into their care within that 6-week or more period. So that lovely advance notice doesn't generally happen. I think the only occasions when we've had more of that is when in my previous authority, we did deal with the Chinese students. So there was much more communication and organisation involved and having to do a lot of DBS checking for parents at the school. But yeah, on the whole, that doesn't happen. Hopefully you're all aware of the multi-agency safeguarding hub, and that is where notifications need to be made. As much as I'm saying, please come to me if you have questions, use me as a consultant, let's have those conversations. The actual notification process does need to be done via MASH because that is our front door into the service. And although kinship do take a lead on awareness raising, the actual assessment for private foster carers and those children still sits within the assessment service at the front door. If that process ever changes, I will let folk know, but that's the current way we do things. Thanks, Kirsty. So as a partner agent, talk to adults who are caring for the child. If you, for example, if you're at a school and you're noticing that Johnny's mum isn't the one collecting him from school, isn't the one dropping him off at school, who is this person who's doing that? Have a think about some curious questioning around who people are. Who is this child living with? Are children talking about where they're living, how long they've been living somewhere? And very often it can be through those informal conversations where you're picking up that actually there's somebody else caring for a child. If you do find that out, it's important that the child and the carer know that nobody's done anything wrong, they're not going to get into trouble. It's a case of ensuring that we have the conversation and double check what the situation is so we can be clear about relationships and whether this is private fostering, and letting those adults know as well that they really should be notifying, and if they don't notify the local authority, then that means you as a professional would have the responsibility to do that. You don't need to be getting consent from people in order to make that notification to us. Again, if there are any queries around that and you're not sure, that's when you can come to me and have that conversation. You don't need to give names, but if you said, this is the situation I'm faced with, I'm not sure what to do, I'm not sure what this relationship is, then that's a really good time to come and have that chat. Thank you, Kirsty. So if you found yourself in a situation where you may well have identified private fostering, it's always a good idea to just follow up and check that with MASH to ensure that that notification has been made, because that will be when you know whether actually it hasn't, if you need to therefore go and say something and fill in that referral form. When the assessment of private fostering is done, it's really good for that to be a collaboration between those involved. So you will be asked to contribute, give your views, and the assessing social worker should be in touch with you to organise that. Keeping a check on the child's welfare and progress, ensuring that you're sharing that with the assessing social worker, as much as the assessing worker will also be doing that on visits during monitoring and assessment. Again, it's that two-way process and making sure that that information sharing is in place. And yeah, just again, it's that ongoing liaison and involvement so we can make sure that if there are any needs, if there are any concerns, then we can get onto those as quickly as possible. Thanks, Kirsty. So as a local authority, and this is where it currently sits within kinship, there is a responsibility on us to raise awareness. So as part, we have an awareness raising plan. This is part of it. We have recruitment events for mainstream foster carers, and we will go and share information when we're out at events. There's a lot of digital information that is sent out to schools, including boarding schools, probation. We don't have prisons in Herefordshire. That was a slightly difference from my old local authority. Various agencies. So there is a very large awareness raising plan, and that's something that Ofsted look at when they come and inspect us, as they did towards the end of last year. If we know about an arrangement, it is for the local authority to assess that arrangement. And as I said earlier, that's currently done via the assessment service at the front door. And the point of that is to make sure that we are okay, we are satisfied that the private foster carer is suitable, that the child is safe, their welfare is being promoted, their needs are being met. Because if they aren't, that's when we can step in and ensure that child is safe. There have been circumstances in this local authority and in my last where children do move on to permanent orders, such as special guardianship or child arrangements orders. So children are not necessarily staying within private fostering arrangements forever and a day. Some of them move back home, some of them become children who need to be looked after. They do need to be in the care system because things are not right for them, and others go on to permanent orders. So the assessment and what's actually going on is really, really important. We're also there to advise and support children who are privately fostered. So as much as an assessing worker is there to assess a private foster carer, they are also there to ensure that the child is okay, is spoken to alone. They can advise parents, we can advise carers. So it's that holistic approach to the assessment. And as I said earlier, if children do need to be children in need or in need of protection, that is something that we can take forward as necessary. Thanks, Kirsty. So what does an assessment worker do when they get the notification? They are required to visit the private foster carer's home within 7 working days of that notification. So even if the arrangement has been in place for some months and we've only just found out about it, that's fine. It's from the point that the local authority knows about the arrangement. We initiate DBS checks for anyone who is 16 years or older within the household. Now, that doesn't matter if they've had a DBS check from somewhere else previously, particularly if they're working in care, education, etc. They may well have, I don't know, a toilet wall covered in DBS checks. You want to sort of frame them after a few years. But they will need to have that done again in order to be a private foster carer. Speaking to the foster carer, speaking to the child, speaking to the parents, all of the things that you would most likely expect to happen in an assessment will happen and should happen within that first visit. Parents are really important within this because they are the ones who are holding the parental responsibility. And if it's not a carer, it's a guardian who's holding that PR. So it is not a question of just talking to private foster carers and the children and seeing them in isolation. It does need to have that whole family approach and ensure everyone is clear what is happening, agreements are in place, any concerns anyone may have. Financial arrangements I did touch on earlier regarding child benefit or anything that the person with PR would like to give to the private foster carer, but it is important that that is looked at from the beginning of the assessment so we can make sure that the private foster carer isn't finding themselves in a situation where they're really struggling for money or their own family is being impacted because of having the child in their care. Thanks, Kirsty. For anyone who suffers from insomnia and just needs a little bit of reading late at night, I thought I'd pop this in here for you just so you can see where the information regarding private fostering exists. The national minimum standards are the thing that we focus on because that is what we are inspected against by Ofsted. It's not actually that boring, folks. So you could go and read it and not find that you're pulling your hair out at the end. So do have a look. One of the things that I always stress within private fostering as well is that this is about safeguarding. As much as we're sitting under a fostering service, this is about safeguarding, and it is everybody's responsibility to ensure that private fostering is identified. Thanks, Kirsty. Various contacts and information on here. Some of them you will already be aware of because you'll be used to putting in multi-agency referrals to MASH, but do have a look at these. And again, and I don't know if you want to pop it in the chat at all, Kirsty, you could put my details in there. I'm happy for people to email me. I'm available on Teams. I do work online most of the time because I don't live in Herefordshire, but I am also within Herefordshire at times. So if anyone wanted to meet in person or needed or wanted perhaps a talk with some staff or a team within the agency, then that's something that we can organise as well. So do feel free to come to us if you think that there's something that we could help with, even if it's about awareness raising within your team setting. That's absolutely fine. I'm more than willing to do that. Thanks, Kirsty. Kirsty's popped the QR code here, so hopefully this will make it easier for you to complete the survey, folks. And I think at the beginning of the chat, there was also some information about it. So please do that if you wish to. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has. Again, don't